Det norske vitenskapsakademiet kunngjorde 23. mars i år navnene på vinneren av Abel Prisen 2006. Årets prisvinner er den svenske matematikeren Lennart Carleson for hans dyptgående og nyskapende bidrag til harmonisk analyse og teorien om kontinuerlig dynamiske systemer. Prisen, som også kalles Nobelprisen i matematikk, er på 6 millioner norske kroner og deles ut hvert år for fremragende vitenskapelig arbeid i matematikk. Den 23. mai i år overrakte dronning Sonja prisen til Lennart Carleson under en høytidelig seremoni i universitetets aula.
Og så vil jeg be Hennes Majestet, dronning Sonja, om å komme fram for å overrekke prisen til Lennart Carleson.
Ers Majestät, medlemmar av Norska Vetenskapsakademin och Abelkommittén, kollegor och vänner. Carl Friedrich Gauss har någonstans beskrivit matematiken som vetenskapens drottning. Att för en tjänare som mig hos denna drottning få stå här i denna vackra omgivning och motta det storslagna Abelpriset är ifrån en riktig drottning är faktiskt en överväldigande händelse i mitt liv. Jag vill tacka så mycket och kanske jag ska främst rikta tacket till det norska folket som genom att instifta det här priset har velat stärka matematikens ställning bland alla vetenskaper. Matematiken beskrivs ofta som ett hus som vi matematiker bygger. Vars och ens uppgift är liten. Vi sätter kanske dit ett handtag på en dörr eller målar en list. Men resultatet blir ett bygge som inte har någon arkitekt men som kan ha stor charm och ibland överväldigande skönhet. Detta liknar vad vi i Sverige brukar kalla för snickarglädje. Jag var en gång på ett möte där en lärarinna berättade från en skola att hon hade berättat den här analogin med att matematiken var som ett hus. Och då så var det en av hennes elever som räckte upp handen och så frågade han: ja, men vi då, var finns vi i det här huset? Och då var det en annan elev som satt i rummet som sa: vi sitter nere i källaren och stirrar in i en vägg. Och så får det ju inte vara. Vi måste på något sätt försöka få in en förnyelse av matematikundervisningen så att man upplever det man sysslar med som en levande verksamhet. So let me just finish with these few words and again thank Her Majesty the Queen for coming here and giving me this beautiful prize, and for all of you who have come here to share this ceremony and make it into a very memorable moment.
I forbindelse med prisoverrekkelsen i Oslo møtte professorene Christian Skau og Martin Rausen prisvinneren til en samtale om hans livslange arbeid med matematikk.
On behalf of the Norwegian and Danish Math Society, we want to congratulate you on winning the Abel Prize for 2006. Since this is a special Scandinavian occasion, being a Swede winning the Abel Prize, we want to ask the two questions in respectively Norwegian and Danish. I år det en omfattende markering I Norge ved at det 100 år siden Henrik Ibsen døde. Han sovnet faktisk inn bare et steinkast unna her vi sitter nå. I sitt aller lengste dikt, som heter Ballongbrev til en svensk dame, forekommer følgende strofer. Aldri svulmer der en løftning av et regnestykkes drøftning. Ti mot skjønnhet hungrer tiden. Vi skal ikke strekke dette for langt, men Ibsen målbærer her den oppfatning som mange mennesker deler, at matematikk og skjønnhet, estetikk, to motpoler som hører til forskjellige sfærer. Har du noen kommentarer til en slik oppfatning?
Jag tror inte att Ibsen var så väldigt väl orienterad om skönheten I matematik. Och den finns ju absolut. Och jag skulle påstå att den är mer lättillgänglig än mången modern tavla eller så att uppfatta skönhet I. Men mycket matematik saknar ju skönhet, och kanske speciellt I modern matematik genom att problemkretsarna ofta har blivit så komplicerade. Så att det är resultatet av flera 100 sidors arbete, och det kan ju knappast kallas skönhet. Men utav den klassiska matematiken så finns det ju slående satser och argument som frapperar en som verkligt originella, och det är klart att man vill använda ordet skönhet på sånt.
Matematikere I hele Skandinavien stolte af at tælle en af deres blandt de første modtagere af Abelprisen. Hvordan vil du karakterisere og vurdere skandinavisk og måske især svensk matematik I en international måleskala?
Jag tror att Skandinavien hävdar sig ganska bra. Vi har ju en väldigt god återväxt tycker jag I Sverige, och jag tror att det är liknande I de andra skandinaviska länderna. Det är svårt att skönja någon ny Abel på horisonten, men det är det ju alltid.
Abel first thought that he had solved the general quintic by radicals. Then he found a mistake, and subsequently he proved that it was impossible to prove the quintic algebraically. The famous and notoriously difficult problem that Lucin formulated or gave in 1913, which actually goes back to Fourier in 1807. You solved that problem in the mid-1960s. We understand that the prehistory of that was converse to that of Abel's, in the sense that you first tried to prove it. Could you comment on that?
So I met the problem already as a student when I bought Sigmund's book on trigonometric series. And then I had the opportunity to meet Sigmund also. He was at Harvard year 51. And I was at that time working on Blaschke products. And I said that maybe one can use that to produce a counterexample. And Sigmund was very positive. I said, that of course you should do. And I tried for some years, and then I forgot, and then it came back to me. And then in the beginning of the 60s, I suddenly realized that I knew exactly why there has to be a counterexample and how one should construct that, because it should be, it's because somehow the trigonometric system is the type of system where it is most easy to produce counterexamples. And then I could prove that my approach was impossible, you know, that this idea would never work. I mean, it couldn't work, because if there would be a counterexample for the trigonometric system, it would be an exception to the rule. And then I decided maybe nobody has really tried to prove the converse. And from that on, it took about 2 years or so.
Okay.
But it's an interesting example of that to prove something hard. It is extremely important to be convinced what is right and what is wrong. You can never do it by alternating between one and the other, because the conviction somehow has to be there.
Mm-hmm. Could we move to another problem of yours that you solved in the solution of the so-called corona problem in 1962? The techniques that you developed in this connection, introducing the so-called Carleson measure, which was used extensively afterwards by other mathematicians. Could you try to explain why the notion of Carleson measure is such a very fruitful and useful notion?
Well, I guess because it occurs in problems of that type. It's very much related to the general theory of BMO and H1 spaces. And originally, and I think that's still true, that the main issue there is the construction of a curve which had this property which is characterized by these measures. And then I showed it to Beurling, and then he said, why don't you formulate it in the general case? So I always thought that Carleson measure was a misnomer, because he was involved in the suggestion that one should formulate it in the... I mean, it's the same proof, which was also the wrong proof, I realized later. Stein gave a much simpler proof using interpolation theory.
Yes. But for the BMO result that came with Fermat later, the Carleson measure was important, wasn't it?
I don't remember the history. I don't think he used that at all.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. I don't know. This is 40 years ago.
I'll move to another of your achievements. You know, Hardy said that mathematics is a young man's game. But you seem to be a counterexample, because after you passed 60 years of age, you and Benedict's managed to prove the so-called Henon Map has strange attractors exhibiting chaotic behavior. The proof is extremely complicated, we know that, and it's a tour de force that took many, many years to do. With this as background, what is your comment on mathematical creativity and age?
Yeah. Well, I hope, and I guess it's true that you don't get more stupid when you get older, but I think your stamina is less. You know, the perseverance of keeping lots of facts in your mind at the same time goes down. Probably has to do with the circulation of blood or something like that. So I find now that it's much harder to concentrate for a long period. And if you really want to solve a complicated problem, you have to keep so many facts available at the same time.
You seem to have focused exclusively on the most difficult and profound problems in mathematical analysis. As soon as you have solved any one of these, you leave the further exploration and the elaboration to others, while you move on to other difficult and seemingly intractable problems. Is this a fair assessment of your mathematical career and of your mathematical driving urge, so to say?
Yeah, I think so. It's a problem solving that is my game, so to say. Not to develop theories. I mean, this is a very important part of mathematics, certainly. But I think they are really different. And what I enjoy is to start from something which is new and where the background is not so complicated. I mean, if you take the Henon case, any schoolboy could understand that. And the tools also are not really sophisticated in any way that they use a lot of theory. The Fourier series, of course, used more machinery that you had to know. But that somehow was my background. But the Henon, I always, when I were in, or am in these circles of people, I always call myself an amateur. You know, I'm not educated as an expert on dynamical system.
Has there been mathematical problems in analysis that you have worked hard on, but not been able to succeed? Or are there any particular problem in analysis that you especially would have liked to solve?
Yeah, definitely there is one in dynamical system, what is called the standard map, which is like Henon, but for area preserving case, which I spent several years on and collaborated with Spencer, for example, and we never got anywhere. But if you want to survive as a mathematician, you have to know how to give up also. And I'm sure there have been many other cases also. But I haven't spent time on the Riemann hypothesis.
Do you have any thoughts? What is the most important features, besides having a good intellectual capacity, of course, that characterizes a great mathematician?
I don't think it is the same. It's not well defined, really. In my case, I mean, if you want to solve problems, so to say, the most important is to be very, very stubborn. And also to select problems which are within reach, because that's some kind of intuition, I believe, which is a little closer to what we talked about initially about beauty. I mean, you have somehow to have a feeling for mathematics, what is right and what is wrong and what is feasible. But of course there are many other mathematicians who create theories and they combine results into new buildings and keep other people working and so on, which is a different kind of mathematicians. I don't think one should try to find a simple formula for people.
You have for several decades worked hard on problems, we talked about that went on to be exceptionally difficult. What made and what kept you going for years with no success guaranteed? And may I ask a follow-up question? What drives a person to devote so much energy to arcane subject which can only be appreciated by the handful of other mathematicians?
Yes, that's a big issue. Stubbornness, I mean, this is what you don't want to give up, right? But as I said before, you have to know when to give up also. But if you want to succeed, you have to be very persistent. And I think it's a drive not to be beaten, so to say, by a stupid problem.
Your main research contribution has been within mathematical analysis. What about your interest in algebra and topology, geometry?
Yeah, geometry is, of course, very much part of the analysis, but I have no feeling for algebra or topology, I would say. I never tried to. I should have learned more.
What do you consider to be the most challenging and exciting area of mathematics that will be explored in the 21st century? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course I have had thoughts. And I mean, most of the influence comes from the outside, and I think we still are lacking a good understanding of what kind of methods we should use in relation to computers and computer science, and in relation to problems depending on the medium-sized number of variables. I mean, we have a machinery for small number of variables, and we have probability for large number of variables. But we don't even know which questions to ask, even much less which methods to use when we have 10 variables or 20 variables.
Well, this leads to the next question. What is the significance of computers for mathematics? I mean, checking experimentally, for example, certain conjectures, and also completing proofs by checking an enormous amount of special cases. What is your thought on computers?
Yeah, there are a few instances that I have been involved with. I had a student, Warwick Tucker, who proved that the Lorentz attractor exists, and that was based on explicit computations of orbits. I mean, that you actually compute, and there you could get away by a finite number of orbits. I mean, in cases like it's very different from the Henon Map, where you can never succeed, and you can never decide if a parameter is good or bad, so to say. But for the Lorentz attractor, he actually proved it for the specific values that Lorentz had prescribed, because you have it's uniformly expanding, so there is room for small changes in the parameter. So that was an example of an actual proof that you could, and then of course you can insist on interval arithmetics, and you know that's the fine part of the game, so to say, in order to make it rigorous for the people who have very rigorous requirements.
Mm-hmm. But what about computers used, for instance, for the four-color problem, checking all these cases and so?
Probably unavoidable. And that's okay. No, I wouldn't like to do it, but it's of course it's the same with the group structures.
Yes, simple groups. Yes. Yeah.
No, I mean we have to accept that.
Yeah. Okay. One question about, you know, the solution of the Fermat conjecture, 350 years old, by Andrew Wiles, uses deep results from algebraic number theory. And my question is the following: do you think that this will be a trend in the future also, that proofs of simply stated result will require a strong dose of theory and machinery?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you can speculate as well as I can do. I mean, the Fermat theorem is, of course, the striking part is the connection between the number theory problem and the modular functions. And once you have been able to prove that, you have moved the problem into away from what looked like an impossible question about integers into an area where there is a machinery.
Your CV shows that you started your university education already at age 17, and you took your PhD at Uppsala University when you were only 22 years old. So my question is, were you sort of a Wunderkind? And what was it that...
No, I didn't feel like a wonder. I never did that.
Can you elaborate a bit upon what arose your mathematical interest, and when did you become aware of that you had some exceptional mathematical talent?
So in high school, I had some books on calculus, so to say, which I inherited from my sisters, and I read those, but otherwise I didn't really study mathematics in any systematic way. So I went to the university, and since I had already, well, it was natural to start with mathematics, and then it just kept going somehow. I was never really said, I mean, I was not born a mathematician, so to say.
You already told us about your PhD advisor, Arne Beurling, an exceptional Swedish mathematician who is probably not as well known as he deserves. Could you characterize him as a person and as a researcher in a few sentences? And did he have a lasting influence on your own work?
Yeah, definitely he was the one who set me. I mean, on the type of problems are the same, but we have a different attitude to mathematics. He is one of the few persons where I would use the word genius. I mean, mathematics was part of his personality somehow. And he looked at mathematics as a piece of art, opposite to, I mean, Ibsen would have profited from meeting him. And he looked at his papers as pieces of art. They were not used for education, so to say, and they were not used to guide future researchers, but they were used as you use a painting. And he liked to hide how he found them. If you would ask him how he found his result, he would say that a wizard doesn't explain his tricks. So that was a rather unusual education. But of course I learned a lot from him. And as you say, he has never been really recognized the way he deserves.
You have concentrated your research efforts mainly on topics in hard analysis with some spices from geometry and combinatorics. Is there a specific background for this choice of area?
Well, I don't think so. I think there is a combinatorial part in all these three problems that we discussed. They have a combinatorial flavor somehow. The curves which are involved in the well, all of them are in the Corona theorem. So, and all of them are, so to say, they are based on stopping times arguments. That you have make some construction and then you stop the construction and you start all over again.
So it's renormalization somehow?
Yes, renormalization, yes. That was something I didn't learn. Beurling didn't like stop. I'm sure he never heard of it. So probability was not part of the Uppsala school. And he didn't like coverings, which is also a part of the combinatorial.
Yeah. Which mathematical area and what kind of mathematical problems are you currently most interested in?
Well, when I like to think about complexity. I would like to prove that it's harder to multiply than to add.
Yeah. But that seems to be notoriously difficult.
Well, I'm not so sure. Maybe.
Okay.
It's too hard for me, but so far.
I would like to move a bit to the organization of research. And let's start with the journal Acta Mathematica. It's a famous, world-famous journal founded by Mittag-Leffler back in 1882 in Stockholm as a one-man enterprise at that time. And it rose very quickly to being one of the most important mathematical journals. And you were its editor-in-chief for a long period, I think 23 years. At least, maybe longer. That's what I got from the CV, at least. So, is there a particular recipe for maintaining Acta as a top mathematics journal? Is refereeing, for example, very arduous refereeing so important, or do you have other methods in mind? What is most important?
The initial period, which is crucial. I mean, that you have built up a reputation so that people find that it's attractive to have a paper published here. And you have to be very serious in your, refereeing and your decisions, so that you have to reject lots of papers and you have to get enemies.
So you have to be unpopular.
Yeah, you have to be unpopular.
Scientific publication at large is about to undergo big changes these days. The number of scientific journals is exploding, and many papers and research results are available on the internet many years sometimes before they are published in print. So my question is, how will the organization of publication, of scientific publication, develop in the future? Will printed journals survive, and will this peer review, which is so important, will that be the same for the next decades? And a last question, how about computer-assisted proofs? We were already talking about those a little bit. What would be a good way to document them? It's apparently impossible to do all the documentation in a printed journal.
That's a long question.
Yes.
I've been predicting the death of the mathematical journal within 10 years for at least 25 years. And it dies slowly, I think, but it will die in the way we know it today. So, but if I can have a wish for the future, I would wish that we have, say, 100 journals or so, which in mathematics, yes, which would be very selective in what they publish, and they wouldn't accept anything that isn't really finalized somehow. In the worst situation, which has already passed, people tend to use it as a way of publishing half-baked result in order to get better promotion and to get a raise in their salaries and so on. And this was invented by Gutenberg 500 years ago in order to let information spread from one person to another. But we have completely different systems today, which are much more efficient than going through the printing process. And we haven't really used that already. We haven't used it enough. I mean, why? I think also the refereeing exaggerated. I mean, let people publish wrong results and let other people criticize them. I mean, as long as it's available on the net, it wouldn't be any great problem. And also referees are not very reliable. I mean, it doesn't really work anyway. So I think I'm predicting a great change, but it is extremely slow in coming. And in the meantime, the printers make lots of money.
Yeah. I've just returned from a nice stay at the Institut Mittag-Leffler, which is situated in Djursholm, north of Stockholm, one of the leading research institutes of our times. This institute was, when you stepped in as its director back in 1968, something about what I would characterize as a sleeping beauty. But it turned it to something very much different, very much active within a few years. And by now it's so that around 30 mathematicians work together there at every specific time, but there is almost no permanent staff. So in that sense, it's very much different from other research institutes. If you compare, for example, with the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton or the Institut des Hautes Études Scientifiques at Beurling. So my question is, what was the inspiration for the concept of the Institut Mittag-Leffler as it looks like today? And also how was it possible to get the funds, the necessary funds for this institute? And finally, how would you judge the present activities at the institute?
Yeah, to answer the last question first, I have to be satisfied with the way it worked out and the way it continues also. I just hope that it can stay on the same course. Well, in the 60s, there was a period when the government, maybe governments, or at least the government of Sweden, was willing to invest in science. And they didn't like, there was a long discussion about people moving to the United States, and Hermander had already moved, and the question was if I was going to move. And then you could make a bargain with them. And so we got some money, which was, of course, the important part. But there is also a connection which is not so well known, which is rather amusing to the Acta, namely from Mittag-Leffler's days, when there was almost no money in the funds of the academy for the Mittag-Leffler Institute. When we had now accumulated a rather large sums of money by selling old volumes of the Acta. Mittag-Leffler printed large stocks that he never sold at the time, and which were stored in the basement of the institute. And during the 50s and 50s in particular, and early 60s, one could sell the complete set of volumes. And if you, I don't remember what they costed, maybe $2,000 or so. But if you sell one, he had several hundred copies, and there were several hundred new universities. If you multiply these together, you get a large sum of money. And that is still the foundation of the economy of the institute.
You were almost at the same time the president, or a bit later, I think, the president of the International Mathematical Union, an organization that promotes international cooperation within mathematics. That was during the Cold War. And I know that you were specifically concerned in integrating Chinese mathematics at the time. Could you share some of your memories from your presidency?
Well, I still consider my main concern to be the relation to the Soviet Union. The Chinese question had started, and I went to China and talked to people in Taiwan and to people in mainland China, but it didn't work out until the next period, and it simply ripened. And the main issue was always whether there should be a comma in a certain place or not in the statutes. But with the Russians, it was much more serious somehow. You know, they threatened to withdraw from international cooperation altogether. And I always considered, we all in the committee considered that the relations between the West and the East was the most important issue of the International Mathematical Union. So that was exciting. Negotiations with Pontryagin and Vinogradov was kind of special.
Did these two express some anti-Semitic views also?
No, I wouldn't. Well, they did, of course, in conversation, so to say, but not officially. I remember Vinogradov being very upset about a certain Fields Prize being given to somebody, probably Jewish, and he didn't like that. He said this is going to ruin the Fields Prize forever. And then I asked him if he knew who received the first Nobel Prize in literature. You? Well, it was a French poet called Silly Prudhomme, and that was during a period when there was Tolstoy and Ibsen and Strindberg available to get the prize. Well, it survived.
Yes.
I would like to move to another point. You wrote a book, Matematik for vor tid, Mathematics for Our Times, and that's quite some time ago, and it was published in '68. And it was a book both debating certain aspects of mathematics and also giving concrete mathematics and teaching it to people. So let's start with a debate point. One of the things that you were talking about was the distinction between pure and applied mathematics, and you described it as being harmful for mathematics and harmful for the contact to other sciences. The distinction between mathematics, pure mathematics on the one side and applied mathematics on the other side, you described it as harmful for mathematics and also for the contact to other sciences. How do you see recent developments in this direction? What are the chances for cross-fertilization between mathematics on the one side and, say, physics, biology, computer science on the other side? Isn't computer science somehow presently drifting away from mathematics?
Yeah, but I think we should, it's because mathematics hasn't really produced what we should produce here, new tools. And I think this is, as we talked about before, one of the challenges really. And we still have lots of input from physics, I mean statistical physics and from string theory and I don't know what. So I think that's really the state. I stand by the statement from 60 whatever. But that book was written mostly as a way to encourage the teachers to stay with established values. That was during the Bourbaki new math period, and mathematics was really going to pieces, I think. And the teachers were very worried, and they had very little backing. And that was somehow the main reason for the book.
Yeah, you were emphasizing concrete problems and their solutions, right? That brings me to another related question. So if you compare with 68 or that period, today mathematics at a relatively elevated level is taught to many more people, and other points are emphasized. For example, the use of computers is now at a much higher state than at the time where it almost didn't exist. So what are your main points of view concerning the curriculum of mathematics at, say, high school level and beginning university level? Are we at the right terms?
Again, something one can predict happens very slowly, namely how do you incorporate the fact that you have the computers and you have these hand computers into the mathematics teaching. Because of course the criticism sounds very convincing. Why should you do lots of exercises in computing when in reality you use hand computers and programs for everything? And I think there is a point to it. And in the meantime also one has thrown out many things which are related to the basics of mathematics, for example, proofs and definitions and logical thinking in general. So I would like somehow, I mean it's difficult and dangerous somehow to throw out all computational aspect. I mean, one needs to be able to do, I think, in order to have any kind of feeling for mathematics. But you have to find a new balance somehow. And I don't think anybody has seriously done that. They talk a lot about didactics, but I never understood that there is any progress here. You know,
getting to public awareness of mathematics, it seems very hard to explain. We experience that right now, to explain your own mathematics to the man on the street. And in general, pure mathematicians have a hard time when they try to justify their business. Today there is an emphasis on immediate relevance, and it's quite hard to explain what you do to the great public, to people in politics, and even to your colleagues from other sciences. Do you have any particular hints on how mathematics should convey what they do in a better way?
Yeah, we should at least work on it. I mean, it's important, but it's of course very difficult because it's abstract. One important issue here, which sounds kind of stupid, is that physicists have been able to sell. I mean, who knows what an electron is, and who knows, I mean, a quark is, and so. But they have been able to sell these words. The first thing we should try to do is to sell the words so that people get used to the idea of a derivative or an integral or whatever.
As something mysterious and interesting, right?
Yeah, it should be something mysterious and interesting. And that would be one step in the direction. Because once you talk about something, you have a feeling that you know what it is. But we haven't been able to really to sell these terms, which I think is too bad. Well, one should insist on that.
Looking at Norway, the Abel Prize is a major attempt to make mathematics visible in the public. So how do you judge the activities altogether? They include also the Norwegian Abel, which is a competition for young mathematicians or school boys and girls. as a tool to promote the subject. You have been around and giving prizes today.
Well, it's good. I mean, any kind of propaganda for the subject should be welcomed by everybody of us. And mixture with research and the school is also a good idea. There is very strong feeling in the school, certainly, that this is a God-given subject that is once and for all fixed. And of course that gets boring.
Finally, I would like to step away from mathematics and ask you a bit to tell us a bit about what interests, what are your specific interests apart from mathematics as a private person?
Not so much. I have a house and I read, and but I have no hobby or like collecting stamps or so. So that's not a very good question.
So let's come to the conclusion, Christian.
Til slutt så vil jeg på vegne av Norsk Matematisk Forening takke så mye for dette intervjuet.
Og jeg vil gerne tilslutte mig på vegne af Dansk Matematisk Forening and of the European Mathematical Society. Thanks very much.